Usually when we talk about streaming a high-definition video, there's this underlying expectation of instant gratification.
Yeah.
Like you click play, the screen lights up, the audio kicks in, and you're just immediately immersed.
Right, it's totally seamless. I mean, from the user's end, it's completely effortless. We just expect all that underlying technology, the servers, the fiber optic cables, to just do the heavy lifting behind the scenes.
Exactly, without us ever noticing. But then inevitably, you encounter a terrible internet connection. You click play, and suddenly that beautiful movie is just, well, it's a spinning wheel.
Oh, the dreaded buffering wheel.
Right, it's buffering. And the raw data is sitting right there on the server perfectly intact. The computer knows exactly what the movie is, but the processor just cannot render that data in real time.
Yeah, the pipeline is totally choked.
And you are left staring at a frozen screen, completely taken out of the moment, just waiting for the system to catch up.
Yeah.
And that agonizing, frustrating, completely paralyzing buffering wheel, that is exactly what happens in your brain when you try to speak a second language but get trapped in the mental habit of translation.
That is the absolute textbook definition of the fluency delay. It's a massive cognitive traffic jam.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this, you've probably experienced that dreaded fluency delay. You know the exact feeling. Picture this. You're sitting at a dinner party, or maybe, I don't know, a high-stakes business meeting.
High pressure.
Super high pressure. Someone makes a passing comment or a joke, and you understand it perfectly. Instantly, the perfect response is fully formed in your native language. It's witty, it's insightful, the timing is flawless.
But then the buffering wheel starts spinning.
Yes. Your brain desperately tries to translate that brilliant thought into English.
Yeah.
You're scanning your mental dictionary. You're like trying to remember the past participle of an irregular verb.
Second-guessing a preposition.
Exactly. And by the time your brain actually renders the translation and you finally open your mouth to speak, the conversation has completely moved on. Somebody else is talking about the weather, and you're left holding this magnificent thought with absolutely nowhere to put it.
It's just an incredibly isolating and frankly frustrating experience. And what's so deeply fascinating about this from a cognitive science perspective is that it's almost never a vocabulary problem.
Wait, really? Most people think they just don't know enough words.
Right, but they usually do. It's fundamentally a processing problem. The information is there, just like the movie data on that remote server you mentioned, but the neurological pathway required to deliver it is completely clogged by the translation mechanism.
Which is exactly why our mission today is so vital. We are going to completely decode this cognitive bottleneck. We're doing a deep dive into a masterclass on cognitive rewiring, focusing on how you can permanently stop translating a second language in your head.
Yeah, and start training your brain to think directly in English, just like a native speaker.
Exactly. We'll identify the invisible mistakes holding your fluency hostage and lay out a really specific, step-by-step psychological protocol to help you build an English inner voice.
And, if we step back and connect this to the bigger picture of neuroplasticity, we're really talking about fundamentally changing how your brain interacts with the world. We're not just memorizing vocabulary here.
Right, we're talking about structural brain change. So let's look at this cognitive bottleneck first. The research makes a really stark point right out of the gate, which is that translating from your native language to English doesn't just slow you down a little bit. It literally forces your brain to work twice as hard.
Yeah, it's a massive system-draining delay. It completely eats up your working memory because you have to think about what the brain is actually doing during a translation event.
It's not just a simple word swap, is it?
Not at all. I mean, when you translate, your brain isn't just opening a neat little mental filing cabinet, grabbing an English word and doing a one-to-one swap. That's how a 1990s computer algorithm works, not a human brain. When you translate, you are actively battling conflicting grammatical structures and entirely different cultural frameworks. Every single language on Earth maps physical reality differently. So when you force your brain to generate a complex thought in your native language and then forcefully drag it across the linguistic border into English,
you're fighting against the syntax and logic of both languages at the exact same time.
Exactly.
There's a perfect example of this in the literature regarding how different languages perceive physical states. Like, let's say you're sitting in a drafty room in the middle of winter, and you want to express the concept of feeling chilly. The target phrase in English is super straightforward. I am cold.
Simple enough.
But if you do a literal word-for-word translation from certain native languages like Spanish or French, your brain produces the phrase, I have cold.
Right, and to a native English speaker, hearing "I have cold" sounds fundamentally unnatural. At best, it's momentarily confusing.
At worst, it sounds like you're diagnosing yourself with a viral infection. You're just trying to ask for a sweater, and they think they need to offer you cough medicine.
Yeah, exactly. But when you look at the underlying mechanics, it makes total logical sense why the brain makes that specific error. In many native languages, the sensation of coldness is categorized linguistically as a possession.
Oh, interesting. Like an object you temporarily own.
Yes. But in English, coldness is categorized as a state of being. It's something that you are. So when you translate in your head, you aren't just swapping out vocabulary for the temperature, you're literally colliding two entirely different philosophical ways of perceiving reality.
Which is exactly why the translation method inevitably leads to those really awkward, clunky phrasings.
Yeah.
You're basically trying to fit a square peg into a round hole in real time while another human being is staring at you waiting for a response.
And the cognitive load there, the sheer amount of processing power required to manage that translation while also dealing with the social anxiety of the conversation is immense. It's no wonder the brain freezes up.
But the flip side is what happens when you manage to strip away that translation layer. When you learn to bypass the native language and think directly in English, the benefits don't just add up, they compound exponentially.
They absolutely do. It's not merely that you can speak a few seconds faster. Your baseline confidence just skyrockets.
Because you're no longer pausing for 5 agonizing seconds, staring at the ceiling, trying to compute the sentence before you speak. Words just come to you.
Exactly. But the cognitive benefits go even deeper. Your listening comprehension radically improves.
Wait, really? I think a lot of learners miss that connection. How does thinking in English help you listen better?
Because if you're actively thinking in English, your brain is able to process English conversations at their natural native speed. You stop frantically pausing your internal tape recorder to translate what the other person just said into your native language.
Oh, wow. So you eliminate that internal pause, and suddenly you can keep up with rapid-fire group conversations.
Yeah, or understand fast-paced movies without relying heavily on subtitles. You even process the lyrics of music instantly as you hear them, instead of translating everything.
That's incredible. But here's where it gets really interesting to me. The documentation suggests that thinking directly in English actually perfects your physical pronunciation. I have to admit, that sounds a bit like magic.
It does sound like magic, right?
Yeah, like, how does a totally silent thought inside the privacy of my own skull make my physical vocal cords produce better sounds?
It feels counterintuitive, but what's happening there is the activation of the internal auditory loop. When you train your brain to think directly in English, you're stimulating the language centers of your brain areas like Broca's area and Wernicke's area in a way that allows you to vividly hear the phonetic sounds in your head precisely the way native speakers say them.
So you aren't filtering the English vocabulary through the accent patterns of your native language anymore.
Exactly. You are essentially rehearsing the pure native pronunciation internally before the words ever leave your mouth. It's very much like mental shadow boxing for an athlete.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Yeah, a boxer visualizes the perfect form of a punch repeatedly, so when muscles finally fire, the form is flawless. Thinking in English is mental shadow boxing for your vocal apparatus.
Mental shadow boxing. That's brilliant. Okay, so we've established the stakes. The benefits of thinking in English are immense. Faster processing, better listening, improved pronunciation. So if translation is so painful and direct thought is so beneficial, why is our brain's default setting to take the harder, infinitely more frustrating route?
Well, this brings us to a really crucial point about human psychology and biology. The human brain is an incredibly efficient, energy-saving organ. It's designed to conserve energy whenever possible, so it will almost always default to the path of least resistance.
And the native language is the ultimate path of least resistance.
Exactly. For any learner, their native language is a massive, heavily paved, brightly lit, 8-lane superhighway. It's been reinforced since childhood. It requires zero conscious effort.
While English is just a tiny, unpaved dirt path, they've just started clearing through a dense forest with a machete.
Perfect way to put it. So, in a moment of cognitive stress, like a live conversation with a native speaker, the brain naturally panics. It looks at the difficult dirt path, it looks at the effortless superhighway, and it immediately jumps onto the superhighway, trying desperately to use the native language to solve an English problem.
It's retreating to safety. A totally natural survival mechanism.
It is. But what the research makes clear is that this isn't just a biological instinct we're helpless against. Learners actually actively reinforce this bad habit through very specific mistakes. Mental roadblocks they put in their own way, usually without even realizing it.
So we are actively sabotaging our own efforts to pave that dirt path. That brings us to section 2 of our deep dive. Let's look at these mental roadblocks holding our fluency hostage. The literature points out 4 major mistakes that block the brain from thinking in English.
Yeah, and if we break them down, we can see how they feed into each other. The first major roadblock is the most obvious one, relying far too heavily on translation as a crutch.
Right. Relying on translation isn't just a speed bump. It fundamentally prevents the brain from ever forming a direct neurological connection to an English concept. Like, if you always use your native word for apple as a mental bridge to arrive at the English word apple, your brain learns the bridge itself is mandatory.
There's a brilliant analogy used by cognitive linguists for this. They compare relying on translation to riding a bicycle with training wheels permanently attached.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. When you first get on the bike, the training wheels make you feel incredibly safe. You don't tip over. But the critical flaw is that as long as those training wheels are touching the ground, you are never actually balancing.
You're never really riding the bicycle. You're just forcefully pedaling a very clunky tricycle.
Exactly. And as long as you're on a tricycle, you will never reach the fluid grace of someone who has taken the training wheels off and learned to lean into the turns. You have to trust your brain's ability to balance even if you wobble a bit at first.
But taking the wheels off requires taking a risk, which leads us to the second major roadblock, the absolute obsession with overthinking grammar.
Ah, yes. The grammar trap.
Okay, I have to push back on this one a little because I hear this advice a lot. Stop worrying about grammar, but it always sounds counterintuitive.
Hmm.
Isn't grammar the entire structural foundation of a language? If we intentionally stop thinking about the rules while we speak, are we just going to sound foolish, like a toddler throwing words together?
It's an incredibly common concern, and honestly, it's where so many highly intelligent learners get permanently stuck. But if we look at how natural language acquisition works, focusing intensely on perfect grammar rules while you're actively trying to speak induces massive analysis paralysis.
So it's like, okay, sticking with the bicycle analogy. Obsessing over grammar while trying to have a conversation is like trying to mentally calculate the physics of gravity, wind resistance, and gyroscopic momentum while you're actively trying to pedal down a hill.
Yes, it is a mathematical guarantee that you are going to freeze up and crash directly into a mailbox. Fluency requires that you just start pedaling first. You can adjust your posture later once you have forward momentum.
Forward momentum is more important than theoretical perfection.
Exactly. And there is a validating fact here. Native speakers themselves do not think about grammar rules while they are talking. When I'm speaking to you right now, I am not mentally diagramming my sentences.
Right, you aren't checking if your subject and verb agree before every word.
No, I'm just focusing on the meaning I want to convey. And guess what? Native speakers make minor grammatical mistakes all the time.
We really do. We dangle modifiers, we end sentences with prepositions constantly, we completely abandon the distinction between who and whom, and the world absolutely does not end. The conversation keeps flowing because the listener is focused on the meaning.
Because the ultimate evolutionary goal of language is communication and connection, not textbook perfection. And realizing that ties directly into the third mental roadblock, the paralyzing fear of making mistakes.
Oh, this one is so deeply rooted, especially for adults. We just hate looking incompetent.
We really do. The fear of sounding imperfect completely shuts down what psychologists call the affective filter. It shuts down the mental sandbox that is biologically required for learning. If you're terrified of saying the wrong thing, your brain enters a state of mild threat. It refuses to experiment.
And without experimentation, without that messy trial and error, there is zero growth. You're just frozen on the bike, refusing to pedal because someone might see you wobble.
Exactly. And then there's the fourth roadblock, which is environmental, a fundamental lack of immersion in daily life.
This makes perfect sense. If your entire daily life, from waking up to going to sleep, is filled exclusively with your native language, your brain is naturally going to default to that superhighway.
Yeah, if the only time you use English is during a controlled 1-hour study block, you're signaling to your brain that English is just an academic subject to be memorized, not an essential tool for daily survival.
Immersion is the vital trigger. It tells the brain, hey, we actually need this dirt path to navigate our environment, start paving it. So we've identified the enemy, We know we have to unbolt the training wheels, stop calculating grammar physics, dismantle our egos, and immerse ourselves. But knowing the problem isn't the same as fixing it. How do we practically force our brain to start pedaling in English?
This is where we move into highly actionable steps. The cognitive framework provides a very concrete, active reprogramming protocol, a sequential process designed to rewire the brain's default pathways.
I love actionable protocols. So the first phase is deceptively simple. Start by actively naming environmental objects in English. You just look around your room and you consciously think the labels: bed, window, lamp, phone. And then once that feels comfortable, you upgrade to simple actions. I am drinking coffee from my cup.
What's genuinely brilliant about this progression is how perfectly it manages cognitive load. It doesn't ask the brain to run a marathon on day one. It starts with static nouns, physical objects that aren't moving and don't require complex verb conjugations.
You're literally walking around putting invisible English sticky notes on your entire world.
Exactly. And by doing that, you're forcing the brain to associate the English word directly with the physical object itself, bypassing translation entirely. When you look at a lamp, you aren't thinking the native word and then translating. You see the light source and attach the English sound to it directly.
And then once the brain is stable with those labels, you gently introduce active verbs, building the sentence structure organically.
Right. Then we move to the next phase, talking to yourself out loud with absolutely zero pressure. You just walk around your house alone, narrating your mundane daily life. I'm putting on my shoes. It's a sunny day.
Now, I'll admit this feels a little weird at first.
Yeah.
You might feel like you're starring in an incredibly boring private reality show.
Yeah.
But it forces the language out of silent thought and makes your physical vocal cords actually execute the motor commands.
Yes, it bridges the gap between internal thought and external execution. And it does so in total psychological safety. No one is judging you.
Which brings us to what I think is the most fascinating and probably challenging part of this early protocol: ditching your bilingual dictionary completely, replacing it entirely with an English-to-English monolingual dictionary.
Experts uniformly call this specific switch a massive, non-negotiable game changer.
I want to dig into this because on the surface, looking up a word is just looking up a word, right? If I don't know what excited means, what difference does it make if I get the definition in my native language or in English, as long as I learn the concept?
Yeah. You have to think about the literal neurological pathway a bilingual dictionary forces you to build. Imagine you encounter an unknown English word. You type it into your bilingual app, and it gives you the native translation. In that millisecond, your brain just paved a brand new bridge directly connecting the English word to your native language.
Oh, so I didn't just learn a word. I actively practiced and reinforced the mental habit of translation.
Precisely. You grabbed your training wheels and bolted them right back onto the bike.
That makes total sense.
But look at what happens with an English-to-English dictionary. You look up excited, and instead of a native translation, you get a definition written entirely in simpler English words, feeling very happy and eager.
So you are violently forcing your brain to define an unknown English concept using other English concepts you already know.
Yes. You're trapping the brain inside a closed loop, an English ecosystem. You are systematically starving the native language of any input during the learning moment.
It's like taking away the safety net for an acrobat on a tightrope. When you have a bilingual dictionary, you always have this subconscious comfort, knowing you can drop down into your native language if things get hard. But with a monolingual dictionary, you're suspended up there. You have to survive using only the tools of the new language.
And inevitably, you'll look up a definition, and you won't know a word in the definition. So you look that word up and go down this beautiful rabbit hole of pure English discovery. Cognitive scientists call this desirable difficulty. The struggle itself is what encodes the memory deeply into your brain.
That's incredible. But to survive on that tightrope without getting overwhelmed, the protocol provides a defensive strategy. Deliberately thinking in incredibly simple sentences first, resisting the urge to build complex poetic thoughts right out of the gate.
This is a vital psychological defense. Adult learners are usually highly articulate in their native language. Their identity is tied to expressing complex ideas.
Right. They want to be witty. They don't just want to say, I'm hungry. They want to think, I should really head to the farmer's market to procure organic vegetables for a highly nutritious dinner.
Exactly. And when they attempt to synthesize that masterpiece directly in English, their brain just crashes, the cognitive load is too high, the buffering wheel spins, and they immediately default back to translating. The strategy here is radical simplification. You must force your brain to strip away the poetry and just think, I need vegetables.
I need vegetables. It's so blunt, almost caveman-like. It really bruises people's egos because they feel like they're regressing to a toddler's level.
It requires checking your ego in a door, for sure. But you aren't regressing. You are building a brand new foundation. You can't build a penthouse suite on day one. I need vegetables is structurally sound. Once your brain masters generating that simple structure without translation, the poetic complexity will naturally follow.
Okay, so we're naming objects, narrating out loud, surviving the English dictionary tightrope, and keeping sentences simple. These are great for isolated moments. But how do we bridge the gap? How do you turn these fragments into a continuous stream of consciousness?
That's the transition into the final stages, internalizing the voice and manipulating the environment. It starts with actively developing an English inner voice by holding internal dialogues.
Let's explore that, because we all have that constant running internal monologue, that invisible voice silently judging our outfits or planning lunch.
Right, and shifting that deeply entrenched apparatus into a foreign language is jarring. You don't just wait for it to happen organically. You force it by asking yourself direct questions in English inside your head and forcing yourself to answer them.
The literature has great low-stakes prompts for this, like the moment you wake up, ask yourself, what should I do first today? And then actively formulate the answer. Maybe I'll start with breakfast, or checking your emotions. How do I feel today?
What's neurologically happening is you're simulating the pressure of a genuine conversation, practicing question formulation and answering, but completely removing the variable of social anxiety. You are your own perfectly safe conversation partner.
Oh, wait, let me interject here. A
Yeah.
massive red flag goes up for me. If I'm exclusively talking to myself, aren't I running a huge risk of permanently cementing my own bad pronunciation or incorrect phrasing? Because there's no native speaker there to correct me.
That is a very valid structural concern, and it's precisely why creating an internal dialogue cannot exist in a vacuum. It must be paired immediately with the next step, completely surrounding yourself with massive amounts of English media, absolute immersion.
Ah, so the external immersion acts as the subconscious quality control for your internal voice.
Exactly. Immersion is the calibration tool. The more native audio you passively consume, the more accurately your brain generates it. Your subconscious mind acts like a sponge, absorbing the natural cadence, phrasing, and pronunciation. It uses that massive data set of native input to constantly calibrate your internal voice against objective reality.
So if my beginner inner voice keeps wanting to say, I have cold, but I'm listening to dozens of hours of podcasts where native speakers say I am cold, my brain eventually recognizes the discrepancy and patches the grammatical bug automatically.
Yes. Massive, high-quality input naturally corrects the output over time without needing a grammar rollback.
That's so empowering.
Yeah.
It removes the pressure of needing to be perfect.
Okay, so we've got the theory. But let's be realistic. Knowing how to do this intellectually and executing it in a busy schedule are two different things. How do we integrate this cognitive shift into daily life without burning out?
That brings us to section 5, the highly practical, structured daily regimen, making it a permanent habit.
Right. And the foundational rule is to actively start and end every single day with English thoughts, bookending the day.
From a neurological standpoint, the moments right after waking up and right before sleep are critical. Your brain is in a highly plastic state. By forcing your very first conscious thought to be in English, you set the cognitive baseline for the entire day. You're establishing cognitive time zones. The millisecond you open your eyes, you demand your brain wake up in an English time zone. The prompt is so simple. Today is Monday. I have a meeting at 10 a.m. I will have lunch with my friend.
It forces electrical activity into those English neural pathways before daily stress takes over. And then you bookend the evening. What did I accomplish today? You force your brain to process long-term memory storage in English.
Such a powerful hack. What's the next pillar of the regimen?
Enforcing a strict, non-negotiable 30-minute no translation rule every single day.
A 30-minute quarantine. Sounds intense.
It's intended to be. Think of it like a high-intensity interval training session, a HIIT workout for your cerebral cortex. You're consciously putting the system under acute stress to build stamina. For 30 minutes, absolutely no native language is allowed.
It's like a strict dietary cleanse for the brain.
Yeah.
No native language junk food allowed. And if you stumble, you don't break quarantine, you just push through using your English to English dictionary.
Exactly. The next habit is narrating your life out loud for just a few minutes every day.
Right, like making tea. Standing in the kitchen saying, I'm making tea. It smells so good, I will drink this while reading.
It reinforces the complex physical mechanics of human speech. Producing a foreign language requires motor memory for your tongue, lips, and jaw.
And then there's the strategy of tying English thoughts to simple, mindless activities. Cooking, driving, walking the dog.
A brilliant strategy for sustainable habit formation because it takes zero extra time. We all have these pockets of time where our bodies are occupied, but our cognitive functions are idle.
You hijack the dog walk. Instead of worrying about an email in your native language, you force your inner monologue online. The weather is nice today, the sky is blue.
Yeah,
You magically turn dead time into active immersion.
exactly. Double dipping your time. And the final piece is keeping a simple physical English journal, but you must write in it without worrying about grammar.
The physical act of writing with a pen cements the pathways, but removing the grammar anxiety ensures the ideas keep flowing. So we've got a robust daily system. Big ends, 30-minute brain cleanse, tea narration, hijack dog walks, grammar-free journal. Sounds foolproof.
It is an incredibly strong system, however.
There's the however. Because we're human, motivation will crash. Life gets stressful, and those bilingual training wheels start looking really tempting. How do we troubleshoot these inevitable breakdowns?
The literature identifies three major predictable challenges. The first is combating the natural reflex to instantly default to native language translation the second you feel overwhelmed.
The rubber band snapping back.
Yes. The solution is relying strictly on the English-to-English dictionary and practicing radical patience. When the rubber band snaps, you don't panic. You calmly stretch it back out. Lower your expectations, go back to single words, and don't try to generate complex paragraphs when you're fatigued.
Just survive the moment. Okay, the second challenge induces pure panic. Forgetting words and feeling completely stuck mid-sentence. This specific word you need just evaporates.
This is the flashpoint where 99% of people panic, their affective filter spikes, and they run back to their native language to translate, breaking their immersion entirely.
But the literature provides an amazing cognitive workaround for this, called circumlocution.
Arguably the most vital survival tool a learner can possess. It means talking around the target word. Instead of freezing, you pivot and use simple English words you do know to describe the function or appearance of the missing word.
The refrigerator example in the text is brilliant. If you forget the word refrigerator, don't panic and translate. Use circumlocution. Just say, I need to put this in the cold box where I keep my food.
And the native speaker will instantly know what you mean. They'll probably smile and say, oh, the refrigerator. But the core communication was 100% successful.
It reminds me of playing that party game, Taboo or Catchphrase, where you have to get your team to guess a word without actually saying the word on the card.
It's the exact same cognitive mechanism. Constrained creativity.
It completely reframes the experience. It turns a frustrating moment into a stunned puzzle. Can't say refrigerator? Cold box for food? Forget the word pediatrician, doctor for little kids.
Yeah.
It keeps you firmly balanced on the tightrope.
And every time you successfully execute a circumlocution under pressure, you massively strengthen your brain's agility. You prove to your nervous system that you don't need the crutch of translation.
Which brings us to the final major challenge. Losing motivation due to seemingly slow progress.
The silent killer of language learning. Massive cognitive shifts are invisible day to day. You don't wake up on a Tuesday suddenly fluent. Because you live with your own brain, it feels like you're on a treadmill getting nowhere.
How do we combat that illusion?
By instituting systems to actively, objectively track your progress. You cannot rely on your subjective feeling.
Right, if you slept poorly, your brain tells you you've learned nothing.
Exactly. The text recommends looking back at your grammar-free journal from 3 months ago. You'll instantly see how much more complex your sentences have become. Or record audio voice notes of yourself speaking for 2 minutes.
Oh yeah. Listen to day 1 where you're struggling and compare it to day 60. The auditory difference is undeniable. You can physically hear the buffering delay getting shorter.
Objective tracking provides physical evidence of your invisible cognitive growth. It sustains your motivation.
So fluency isn't a magical destination. It's the slow, steady accumulation of these tiny daily workarounds. Playing catchphrase with the word refrigerator, narrating your tea, refusing to open the bilingual dictionary.
It's consciously choosing the dirt path over the superhighway until the dirt path becomes paved and automatic.
I love that framework. Let's briefly recap our journey today. We started with the massive cognitive bottleneck of the fluency delay, the buffering video caused by real-time translation.
We recognize the 4 mental roadblocks, relying on translation training wheels, grammar analysis paralysis, fear of mistakes, and living in an unimmersed vacuum.
Then we laid out the active reprogramming protocol, Naming physical objects, talking aloud, surviving the monolingual dictionary tightrope, and ruthlessly keeping sentences simple. I need vegetables.
We internalize the process by building an inner voice and using massive media immersion as a subconscious corrective mechanism.
And finally, we grounded it in a daily regimen. Bookending the day, the 30-minute brain cleanse, hijacking dead time, the grammar-free journal, and mastering circumlocution.
It's a comprehensive, entirely achievable approach that shifts the burden from memorization to neurological rewiring.
It totally takes the mystery out of fluency.
Hmm.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, slightly mind-bending philosophical
Oh,
thought.
I love these. Let's hear it.
We've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how to train your inner voice to process reality completely in English. But think about what happens when you actually achieve that. Because languages aren't just different audio labels for the exact same concepts. They carry different idioms, cultural baggage, ways of assigning responsibility.
That is profoundly true. The way a language structures a sentence inherently dictates how you emphasize actors and actions. It shapes your attention.
Right. So here's the provocative thought to mull over. If you successfully train your inner voice to narrate and categorize your reality entirely in English, does the actual fundamental nature of your thoughts begin to change? Since you're operating within a new cultural framework, does thinking in a second language actually give you a second personality, or at least a completely new lens through which you view the exact same world?
It's an incredible point. When you change the operating system, you change the output. You don't just speak differently, you might actually think differently.
Exactly. When that buffering wheel finally stops spinning, you might realize you're watching a completely different movie. It's a beautiful thing to think about as you start labeling the objects in your room tomorrow morning. Pick just one daily habit from today, maybe the 30-minute rule, and start building that new inner voice. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We wish you nothing but the absolute best on your continued journey of learning, and we'll be right here waiting to dive into the next fascinating topic with you soon.